It hit an iceberg. Mystery solved.
Eavesdroppin.
Hello, Michelle.
Hello. How are you?
I am well. And you?
I'm in a bikini.
I can see that.
And I've got beach hair.
Oh, isn't it wonderful being you?
Well, do you know what? We had the shittest rain for an entire holiday, but suddenly the sun's come out and the bikini's on.
That's the weather report for any of those people out there who happen to be in Thailand.
Yes.
Along with Michelle.
Yay!
Jet setter.
It also helps that I had an amaretto sour at happy hour.
Oh, an amaretto sour? I don't know if I like those. Is that the kind of hazelnut, what is it? Not hazelnut, almond flavoured drink?
Well, basically it's Disaronno. Have you ever had that?
No. What's the flavours?
Well, I think it is essentially almond, but it doesn't taste super almondy. And it's the kind of drink that every early 20-something who is past the, what are they?
West Coast coolers.
The West Coast coolers. Yes, it passed.
Alco Pops.
The Alco Pops. It passed the Alco Pops, but they want something a little more sophisticated. So they just neck the Disaronno. But I've gone one step more, Geordie.
What is it? What have you done?
The amaretto sour. And it's bloody delicious. Absolutely lovely.
Okay, anything with a sour in the title is a good cocktail. What about the Brandy Alexander? That hasn't made its resurgent yet. That hasn't come back yet.
No, it hasn't, and neither has a fluffy duck.
Oh, that was my first cocktail.
Yes, we have talked about that. Or what was the blue one?
Blue Lagoon.
Oh, the Blue Lagoon. Of course, I knew
Blue
that.
Lagoon. Yeah. What about the purple one?
What purple one?
There was a purple one, Parfait Amour.
What the fuck? You just made that up.
I did not. We used to drink that at the Manhattan. Parfait Amour and lemonade, please.
We're going to have some Canberra folk writing in about that. I'm sure you weren't the only one drinking a Parfait Amour at the Manhattan.
Anything bright. Parfait Amour and Midori, which is the melon, Japanese melon
flavored. It was green, yes.
Weird green.
Japanese slipper.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Oh. What's in that?
Midori.
And?
I don't know. I just had a Midori. Japanese slipper. It's so exotic.
We are so exotic, aren't we? You and your bikini and me in my loungewear here in London.
Lovely.
You have tuned in, you lucky, lucky people, to your weekly dose of the podcast, the comedy storytelling podcast, Eavesdroppin.
Eavesdroppin.
With me, Geordie.
And me, Michelle. And you're an eavesdropper.
Are an eavesdropper.
That's what you are. You're an eavesdropper. You're eavesdropping on us. I thank you. I pity you. But you're in for a ride.
I couldn't thank you enough. I could not thank you guys enough. And I'll tell you what, they have been writing in thick and fast, Michelle. They just can't keep their little traps shut. And I'm glad of it.
Yes.
Glad of it, I tell you. We have Tamira,
the
modern mystic. Tamira, our modern mystic, has been a bit quiet because she's busy telling people's fortunes.
She's a mystic and she's modern.
She's quite modern.
But what does Tamira say? I'm excited to know.
She sent me this amazing video on Instagram, and it was a story where it was unnerving, actually. There was this Japanese man who noticed that food was going missing from his fridge. So he set up a little camera to see what was happening. And to his horror, discovered that there was a homeless woman who'd been living in the top shelf of his closet for more than a year.
What?
A woman? A woman, a little tiny woman, had wandered in one day when he left his door unlocked and found this small space along with a little mattress and put it up on the top shelf of his cupboard. And every day she'd climb down the little stairs from the cupboard, go into his fridge and eat the food, or she'd go and take a shower. So she lived there like that for a year. When he saw the vid, he contacted police. They searched his home and found her all curled up in a little hidey hole. And she was charged with trespassing. That's a bad Ronald story for you there, isn't it?
That is. But you know what? I actually feel sorry for her. And I feel like if I fell on hard times, maybe I would do that.
Share your space, dude. Share your space. You didn't know she was there. Just allocate a shelf for her.
And a shelf in your fridge. Leave a freaking loaf of bread there.
That's what I meant.
Oh, yeah, I thought you meant a shelf as in like for her to sleep on.
She's got a shelf.
She's
got that. Allocate a fridge shelf.
I had a boyfriend, not a boyfriend, German, who was Airbnb-ing his apartment in Berlin. And what he would do is sort of something similar, but not when the Airbnb guests were there, but kind of. So he would go into the crawl space at the top of the apartment, the kind of roof, and while they were sort of living in his apartment, he'd be in that crawl space living there. So that is a little bit bad, Ronald.
Could you give me some more information about that? Because I do visit Berlin and I do book into Airbnb, so I'd like to know where his is so I can avoid it. It's creepy.
I'll tell you off air, Geordie, because I don't want to give the game up. I don't want to reveal who.
That's horrifying.
It is awful.
Now I don't feel safe anywhere.
Could you imagine, like, he has a little peephole in the shower or something, and you're
yes,
like,
I do imagine that.
La, having a little sing and a wash.
Piss in the shower.
Because the pipes are all the same.
They are all the same. Now. There's not one for pissing and one for showering.
I know, I was wrong.
Now, listen, I've got more things from listeners, and you did tell me that you had some feedback about the Miriam episode that was 3 weeks ago now?
2 weeks
ago. 2 weeks ago. Shari sent me a voice note on the Instagrams as she was listening. She woke up, turned it on, and she was laughing so hard. The voice note was really cute because she was just giggling gaily away in the background. She was commenting. She said, I haven't even gotten into the story yet, but she loved the fact that I had a very earnest trigger warning at the beginning, followed by your very best Christina Aguilera impersonation, which apparently sent her into fits.
I have to say, when you sent through the edit, I was like, oh my God, this sounds really serious. Kermit doing You Are Beautiful. So it sounded like you were taking the piss, just saying.
Oh, I didn't mean that. But, you know, I had to put in the...
Yes, we
had to put in the warnings. Got to do that. And the comedy. Got to do that too.
On that, Jen the hen.
What did Jen say?
She said, oh my goodness, I was very moved by that episode. That poor woman, what a terrible life and what happened to her. Mum was very upset and, like I said, rather moved by that. And she said, well done, girls.
Oh, thank you, Jen. And tell you what, if you had seen the documentary that I watched, which was Miriam, Death of a Reality Star, and I don't know where you can get Channel 4 things in Australia, and I'll be talking about that again in a minute. So maybe we could do some research about where in the world you can find these things.
I'll tell you where. You just need a VPN.
Watching the documentary, as I said in the episode, by the end, when the father, who you kind of think of as a bit of a shit, by the end, it turns out he did accept her. And he showed the picture of her, said, isn't she beautiful, my daughter? Oh my God, I was in floods of tears.
Too little, too late. That's what I say.
Too little, too late, yeah. But Safka also got in touch about that episode, our lovely Safka White Witch. She pointed out the similarities between the story of Miriam and the murder of an American gay man called Scott Amadure, who was murdered after going on a talk show with his best friend, and he confessed to being in love with him on Oprah. No, it wasn't Oprah, it was something else. Jenny Jones, I think it was. They never showed the episode, but there is a lot of Wikipedia action on this story, and I looked it up when she said it. It turns out that this guy got off the fucking murder because after the TV show, Scott, the victim, left a kind of suggestive note on his friend's doorstep, really going into it, saying, you know, this is what I'd like to do if we were together or something, I'm not sure. And the guy lost it, shot him in the chest with a fucking rifle, and somehow had his sentence reduced, and I can't remember how, but he used some kind of caveat where he felt threatened, like his masculinity was threatened or something. It's awful. Look up Wikipedia. Michelle, put a link in the Patreon, and hopefully somebody can look that up because it wasn't very nice. Thank you for pointing it out, Safka.
I actually think I know a little bit about this, and I think Safka's right. From memory, this guy was told somebody liked him. And they didn't say it was a woman, but they didn't say it was a man either. And they said, come on this talk show and it will be revealed of, you know, who it is that's in love with you. And, of course, it all went to shit.
It's another Miriam.
Yeah, it's really terrible.
Well, just briefly before we get into our story today, also there have been other listeners. They're fervently writing in. They are frantically getting in touch. They are dropping me voice notes, emails, and what have yous to tell us what to watch on TV right now. Telerex.
Now that you say it, I have had some
Thick and fast.
telewrecks also.
So how are we going to do this, Michelle? Because we did talk about having a corner of our Patreon page full of tele-recommendations, or is it what we've discussed on the episode over there? Because I feel like Safka is turning into our very own television recommendator extraordinaire, because she's coming through with the goods left, right and centre.
She is indeed. I haven't thought it through properly. I've still got to figure out the best way to do this. But I do think we have to have some kind of collection of these recs, because I want to come back to them. I mean, I was at a bit of a loss recently, and then I was like, I need a tele-rec. Well, I got some. I will tell you that.
You went and found them?
Well, from Eavesdroppin Steph, Fargo season 5.
Oh, I haven't seen any of them.
Well, you don't need to, because they're all individual.
Standalones.
Yes, they are standalones. Now, I don't know if you ever saw Ted Lasso.
Yes.
Wholesome, wonderful. I loved it. Didn't love Juno Templeton, who played Keely. She is in Fargo season 5, apparently. Unbelievably good. So I am looking forward to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Another tele-rec, probably one for the Aussies, Alone, season 2. They go out and they have to survive on their own. It is reality. It's like Survivor.
Oh.
A woman won last season.
My husband would love that. He's a bit of a wild man of the woods. More tele-recommendations. Shout out to Charlene for recommending The Man Who Came Back from the Dead on Channel 4, another British television station. Again, you'll have to VPN it if you're not in England. I've started watching it and it's already hooked me. I had to fall asleep halfway through, but I will finish the rest tonight. It's amazing.
Tell me again, what's it called?
The Man Who Came Back from the Dead.
I love it already. What a title. Right up my street.
Safka is watching Netflix and Ashley Madison's Sex, Lies and Scandal. It's a documentary. And Linda, lovely Linda, when I was looking for films for my family, she suggested The Village, which is also by M. Night Shyamalan. I have seen that, and I did like that one because they're very hit and miss, the rest of his films. I actually sat down and watched Jaws with my littlest last weekend. It's his favourite all-time film of all times.
So it still holds up?
Not for me, but for him it did. The Jaws does look like a puppet, but there's some great performances. I actually found Roy Scheider quite handsome in it. And my son, little one, who's 11, loved the character and the actor Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss. So I think next on the agenda is another Spielberg film with Richard Dreyfuss, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But Linda recommends The Village. Ray recommends Brian and Charles on Netflix. And he actually watched it twice. He thinks it's a masterpiece. And then he also said Cat Person. And I've just Googled that. It's a psychological thriller, not for the family, just for the grown-ups. And that's all my television recommendations.
Telerex for sure. Telerex, one more. I'm watching telly. You're watching telly. We're watching telly on the telly.
It's the television.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Geordie. And thanks
you, to the listeners.
Eavesdroppers.
Yes.
We love it when you write in. We really do.
So this week, we're going to have dip our little toe in the waters of conspiracy theories. And I particularly put my whole leg in the water for the Titanic conspiracy theories. Have you ever heard any conspiracies around the Titanic, Michelle?
No, and it is surprising because it is one of the all-time biggest mysteries.
What's the mystery?
Well, why did it go down?
It hit an iceberg. Mystery solved.
But did it?
Yes, it did. Mystery solved.
Okay, all right, okay.
Here's what we know.
But why was it not built to last? It was meant to be built to last.
Well, there are a few theories around that, Michelle, like your inquiring mind. Others have been hard at work thinking of reasons why as well. And here's what we know. On the night of April 14, 1912, the RMS Titanic hit an iceberg and sank the next day in freezing cold waters of the North Atlantic Ocean. It happened, I think, close to midnight. That's why it's spanning 2 days. And also, I think of a ship like that, it was enormous. Took a while to go down. And it was its maiden voyage, aka the first time it ever went out on waters. And it started in Southampton in England, and it was heading to New York City in the United States with a quick stop in Cherbourg, France on the way. Some of the world's most wealthiest people were on board this ship, and hundreds of people traveling to the British Isles, Scandinavia, and other parts of Europe searching for a new life in the United States and Canada were aboard as well. So there's immigrants and there was the wealthy. And if you've seen the film Titanic with Kate Winslet and her tits out hanging off the front of the bow of the ship, you'll know that there was a downstairs and an upstairs.
Yes. And she fell in love with the downstairs and she was upstairs. It's upstairs, downstairs.
Upstairs, downstairs,
just
on
sea.
A boat. Yeah. So not all of those who boarded stayed aboard for the entire journey. And that included, a bit of interesting self-disclosure here, my husband's great-grandmother and aunt, who were on board from Southampton and got off at Cherbourg. His aunt Eileen was 11 at the time, and she posted letters from the ship. This is famous in the family, and it's verified as well. Legend has it that her handwriting and her spelling, because they were homeschooled, was appalling. Those letters were then, years later, being auctioned in Manchester in the 80s, and the family sent my husband's mum up to bid and win those letters back because she did not want her bad spelling to be discovered, because I think she went on to found a lot of schools and things like that in the United States, Aunt Eileen. But I did actually see the letters online. I don't think they're in the family anymore.
She didn't win the auction.
She did win them.
Oh.
But then when Eileen died, her son then relinquished them back to public domain. And in it, they go on about my husband's great uncle Denis, who was Eileen's brother, who had caught an eel off of the side of the Titanic and had it for breakfast.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Gross.
I think it might actually be back in Spring Hill, which is in Northern Ireland, and that is the family house. But anyway, back to the Titanic. Sadly, of the 2,223 passengers and crew members aboard, 1,517 people lost their lives on that night.
That's a lot.
It is. Over the past century, people have tried to make sense of the tragic event by making up tales of ominous signs that the disaster would not have occurred had they not been ignored. So perhaps, Michelle, that's one of the reasons that people are looking for what, mistakes were made, who's to blame?
Yep.
There was even an elaborate conspiracy that had been dreamed up to explain the real reason behind the disaster. And a lot of them have their beginnings in that pro-Trump conspiracy theory group QAnon and the like. Why? Well, according to one theory, the millionaire banker JP Morgan, who owned the cruise liner, planned the Titanic disaster to kill off rival millionaire John Jacob Astor IV. He was known to be the wealthiest passenger on board. He's the builder of skyscrapers and hotels in New York City.
It's the biggest, grandest, most expensive ship ever built. Are you really going to sink it just to sink a rival? I don't know.
Well, it wasn't just him. There was also Isidor Straus, who's the owner of Macy's, the department store, and Benjamin Guggenheim, the painter and sculptor. They all died aboard the Titanic.
Oh, my God.
All three of them, right? And the theory had its kernel of truth, because all conspiracies do have a little budding kernel of truth somewhere, in the fact that JP Morgan, originally planned to sail on the Titanic, but cancelled at the last minute. This doesn't explain, though, Michelle, quite rightly, how he managed to engineer the ship to be smashed into an iceberg and kill over 1,500 people, as well as those 3 intended on his hit list. But it's said that he wanted to kill them because they opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve.
What, as in the Reserve Bank?
Exactly. But Astor and Guggenheim didn't actually vote on it at all, and Strauss supported it. So it doesn't seem likely that this is the real truth. And believers of this theory also think that the Titanic's decks could be electromagnetically sealed to trap passengers. So it's gone a bit fanciful.
What the fuck?
The QAnonsters.
Oh,
yeah.
Come on. What year was this?
In 1912.
Did they really have all this whatever you just said?
Electromagnetic ability to seal people to the decks. I don't know. I don't think they did. It's a bit fanciful.
Just sounds a bit much to me. Sorry.
There's more. And I'm going to mention another famous name of another famous family, very well known with all conspiracy theories. It's the Rothschild banking family, or even the Jesuits. They're saying that they were the ones that arranged for Astor, Straus and Guggenheim to die on the Titanic. For some reason, those 3 men were the turning point. To me, it sounds like they're quite liberal, bohemian types, creative, big hitters. Maybe they're a bit left-wing. I reckon that's where that's coming from.
Maybe.
But according to the conspiracy circles, the Rothschilds are known for funding an evil global plot because they were the founders of banks across Europe in the early 1800s. So they're always going to be in for it.
I'm not buying this so far.
No. But what about this one, Michelle? Here's another theory. There's hundreds around the Titanic. This is what led me to this story. It was a post on Instagram that said that there was a great switcheroo. The Titanic was actually swapped out with another White Star Line ship, because that was the brand, if you like, of ships, the family it belonged to. And that was called the RMS Olympic. This theory has roots in the fact that the Olympic was damaged while sailing from Southampton to New York in September 1911 and had to return to Harland and Wolff's shipping yard, which was in Belfast, for repairs. The company repaired the Olympic and it sailed off to New York and back. Then in March 1912, the following year, a few weeks before the Titanic set sail, it returned to Belfast for more repairs.
Okay.
The Olympic, right?
Yep.
And this theory claims that someone or some group found the Olympic too severely damaged to be profitable, so they switched it with the Titanic to lose the damaged goods, so to speak. And then they could claim the insurance money, and the fact that a whole lot of people died at the same time was neither here nor there, because obviously cash is more important, isn't it?
Always. Cash is king.
But I find that theory a bit flimsy. They said the Titanic insurance didn't cover the loss of even the most profitable ship of the time, which was the Olympic. If indeed it really happened, they don't think that was it. So I started a story a long time ago, which I was going to do for Patreon, about interesting people who did die on the Titanic. And there's this guy that I found out about called William Stead or Stead. He was a British newspaper editor who was really into early 20th century spiritualism, much like Sherlock Holmes author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He went down with the Titanic, but before that, he spent the past several years claiming that a cursed mummy was causing mysterious destruction and disaster all around London.
So what, like the curse of Tutankhamun? Someone opened up a mummy?
Something like that. So when he was on board the Titanic, Stead, or Steed, I don't know how you pronounce his name, told passengers, I'm going to call him Steed, told passengers what he thought about the mummy's curse. And after the ship sank, one of the survivors told the New York World paper in an interview what Steed had actually said. The media loved this and ran with it. So there was headlines like, Ghost of the Titanic, : Vengeance of Hoodoo Mummy followed man who wrote its history.
Oh my God.
Quite
so
wordy.
It's basically the Daily Mail, but the 1900s.
Yeah, exactly. So what propelled this theory was the fact that Egyptian artifacts were being transported on the Titanic for delivery to a museum in Denver by one of the most famous survivors, Margaret Brown. And some say there was an actual mummy on board the Titanic.
So it was an unhappy mummy.
Unhappy mummy. Margaret, who was this survivor, she was very famous as surviving, and she was also an American socialite who was later known as the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Yes.
Yes, she was hailed a hero after the boat sank, and she insisted that the crew on lifeboat number 6 return to the debris field to look for survivors. Sadly, didn't work out. But she insisted they go back and look.
She tried.
So the truth is, though, about the unlucky mummy story is that it is still at the British Museum. So no mummy was ever loaded onto the ship. In short, it was an iceberg, not a curse, that sank the Titanic. But that doesn't stop those theories. They keep coming in thick and fast, Michelle. Here's a far-out story about the actual shipyard that I mentioned earlier, Harland and Wolff, in Belfast. Now, that's Northern Ireland, and as you'll know, there's famous rivalry between the Irish Protestants and the Irish Catholics. And it's said that the Catholic employees of Harland and Wolff, that's where the Titanic was actually built, they freaked out about the ship's number, which is 390904, because it appeared to read as no Pope when viewed in a mirror.
What? This is stupid. This is like a backwards record.
I know. How did they figure that out?
Kill them all. Oh, God. No Pope.
No Pope.
Who even fucking cares? What does that even
Well,
mean?
the Catholics care. The Catholics care about that. There was a historian of Titanic history called Walter Lloyd, and he said that he received letters from people in Ireland relaying this no Pope story. That theory started in the 1950s. But then in a 1986 book called The Night Lives On, it was revealed that there was no such number. It's all urban myth. Plus, there were no Catholic workers at Harland and Wolff at that point because they'd all been driven away in the late 1800s. So try harder. Conspiracy theories.
Not happening. No. Not happening. So these are all dodgy theories.
Dodgy. Then I found the site about the survivors, which is where I got all that information about my husband's great aunt. And it also referred to a book by a man called George Behe. B-E-H-E.
Behe.
Behe. I don't know how you say that. But it's called, and you'll love this, Psychic Forewarnings of Tragedy.
I do love it.
Yeah?
I love it.
Already?
Yes, I do.
Good. In that book, he explores the psychic forewarnings of the Titanic tragedy, and he tells the story of a Titanic passenger called Isaac Frauenthal, who is a lawyer living in New York, who'd been in Europe to attend his brother's wedding. He returned back to New York on board the Titanic with the brother and his new wife. When they set sail, Isaac told them, even before he got on the ship, that he'd had a dream that made him feel uneasy. And he described being on a big steamship in the dream and it hit something and went down. And he told them this dream was as real as him seeing it with his own eyes, plus he could hear the screams of the frightened passengers. He had the dream again while on the Titanic, and at this point it began to worry him. Then on the night of it happening, right, he's lying in bed reading when he heard this long drawn-out rubbing noise. Rubbing? I don't know what that means.
What's the iceberg against the side of the ship?
Maybe, yes. So he got up to investigate and he heard that the Titanic had hit something, like he heard chatter amongst the crew. So he went to wake up his brother, but his brother just said, "Oh, go back to bed, it's fine." Everybody believed they were in safe hands on board this ship. But the dream was weighing heavily on Isaac's mind, so he went to search for the ship's captain or someone who could explain to him what was going on. And when he got on the deck, he overheard Captain Smith advise John Jacob Astor, the millionaire I told you about earlier, to wake his wife because the passengers might have to take the lifeboats. So he's like, right, let's get going. So he was in panic mode, Isaac was at this point. He went back to his brother's room and pounded on the door. The problem was his brother was so confident in the unsinkability of the ship that he just ignored him. No. When he finally woke up and got them up on deck, he said, "Well, Henry," to his brother, "wasn't so foolish, was I?" And his brother was still insisting on the deck going, "This boat is too big, it won't sink." And then his wife was then put into a lifeboat and Isaac and his brother stayed on deck. But then as the lifeboat began to lower, Isaac's brother's wife said that she would jump out of the boat if her husband didn't join her. So on impulse, the two brothers then jumped into the lifeboat and all three Frauenthals were saved.
Oh my God. That is amazing. I will tell you, recently I was flying from Sydney to Melbourne. We were on the tarmac for 2 hours. Yeah. So just sitting there. And then just as we thought we were about to take off, they said, "I'm very sorry, we have a passenger who needs to deplane. We are going to be even later." Do you know what? That sets panic amongst people because you're sitting there going,
"Why are you getting off?
Have they got a psychic vision? Have they just seen something? Are they like, oh my God, we're all going down. It's a sign.
Exactly.
Everybody get off." It's very nerve-wracking. It's not good because you just think, oh my God, you're second guessing yourself. So do you know what? Those people were very lucky. They took his advice, the brother's advice.
Eventually. Well, here's another one from this book by Behe. Eugene Daly was a young Irishman from Athlone who boarded the Titanic at Queenstown with a group of friends. They were all travelling in steerage, a.k.a. where Leonardo DiCaprio was in the film.
A.k.a. cattle class.
Eugene told his pals that he had a disturbing dream that the Titanic was going to sink. He apparently had this dream every night while they were at sea, and he told his friends that the dream was that the Titanic would go down before they reached New York. And on Sunday night, just before he went to bed, he told them that the Titanic was going to sink that night. He just knew it. So a friend of Eugene's remembered his words and also said that he knew the ship would sink because in his dream he had plainly seen the collision with an iceberg. This is a witness who survived remembering.
Yeah.
And after the Titanic actually did collide with the iceberg, his friend, Bertha, stood on the slanting deck. That sounds a little bit like a joke. Bertha stood on the slanting deck. You know, the boy stood on the burning deck. Bertha was standing on the sliding deck.
Or Bertha was standing on the sliding berth.
Bertha on the
berth.
Well, her name was Bertha. There was a name Bertha around then. It was popular in those days. Let's bring it back. But anyway, she remembers that she was standing on the slanting deck as the last lifeboat began to be lowered away. And a sailor in the boat looked at her and said, "Jump." So she did, and she landed safely in the boat. Lucky for Eugene also, he was one of the few male steerage passengers who was fortunate enough to survive the sinking of the Titanic. But that's a little segue. I want to quickly return to William Stead, the British journalist and spiritualist who I mentioned earlier. What an amazing guy. He's thought to be the father of modern journalism, actually, Michelle.
Tell me more.
Well, he wrote an expose on child prostitution in the 1800s, and that pressured legislation to be passed to regulate the sex industry and raise the age of consent from 13 to 16.
Oh, thank God. Well done, William. Well done.
Besides that, he also predicted that his death would be sudden and dramatic and mentioned drowning. But days before the tragedy, he was walking with a young journalist named Shaw along the Strand in London, discussing an article, but Stead kept steering the conversation back to his trip on the Titanic that was upcoming and telling Shaw he would be soon sailing on the new unsinkable ship, Titanic. And at one point, Shaw said he felt an odd feeling that he later described as the feeling of impending death. And he said he felt very strongly that Stead would die within days of their meeting. And he described that feeling as being overpowering, but didn't link it to the Titanic that Stead could not stop chatting about. He didn't mention anything to Stead, but he did go home and make some notes about it and was proved correct a few days later. But perhaps Stead did have some sense of his fate because 20 years earlier, he wrote a fictitious account of a ship that sank after hitting an iceberg called From the Old World to the New. There was even a Captain Smith in the book.
Wow.
I know. Some of the survivors recalled Stead as they went down. They remember him being stoic and contemplative as they were sinking, and that he faced his death in such a kind of like an accepting kind of way. And one survivor recalled it as like a prayerful attitude or one of profound meditation. And a New York lawyer called Frederick Seward remarked on Stead's beautiful composure, concluding that he faced death with philosophical calm.
Wow.
His devastated daughter Estelle, who's also a spiritualist, was luckily able to communicate with her father's spirit through seances with a medium later on. The medium's name was Pardo Woodman. They even published a book called The Blue Island, Experiences of a New Arrival Beyond the Veil, detailing all the things that Stead had told them about death and the afterlife. And the book begins with Stead's spirit voice telling what he saw in the moments before he died. This is his voice post-death, right, on the Titanic. And he says, "There were hundreds of bodies floating in the water, dead. Hundreds of souls carried through the air, alive. Very much alive, some were. Many, realizing their death had come, were enraged at their own powerlessness to save their valuables. They fought to save what they had on earth prized so much. The scene on the boat at the time of striking was not pleasant, but it was as nothing to the scene among the poor souls newly thrust out of their bodies, all unwillingly."
Oh, that's awful. That's a little bit like what you were telling me about that lady on Ghosts who all she saw was bum cracks. Except this time, he's just seeing ghosts everywhere.
Well, he's one of them.
Oh.
This is what after he died, this is what he saw.
Unwilling.
See the dead below him, and he'd see their bodies rising, angry.
A lot to think about. Thank you so much, Geordie. It's very moving, actually.
Yeah, it was quite moving. And I do think that William Stead is quite an incredible character. More to be said on him in future, I think.
I'm going to have to look into him. And also, I like the idea, and maybe this is something for a future podcast, people dreaming the tragedies. We've done something before on this. I'd love to look into it again and see if there are any more people all dreaming the same tragedy at the same time, because we did that about the coal mine.
Yes, Aberfan, and also the book or the board of upcoming tragedies. It's not called that, but it was like a psychic board of impending doom.
Was.
Yeah.
So much to think about. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
The
conspiracy. I think it's a conspiracy. So, I couldn't actually remember what you'd said about conspiracy theories when I was looking into this week's topic. But when I weirdly stumbled across this story, I was like, what the actual fuck is going on here? I'm not going to preface it too much, but I'm just going to say this week I'm looking at what I thought was a Hollywood conspiracy. But it turns out to be something way more bizarre.
How? Interesting and intriguing.
Keep listening. Eavesdroppin. Okay. So I stumbled across an article by Vanity Fair. And I love Vanity Fair articles.
Those articles.
They are. Yeah. They're always a brilliant read. And the reason I found it was because I was interested in looking at whether there were any Australian conspiracy theories of interest, being in Australia and all that.
Yeah.
And this popped up because Aussie actor Heath Ledger was connected to this. But the more I looked into it, the more I realised that Heath Ledger had a bit part in this drama, because the stars of the show were actually Hollywood acting veteran Randy Quaid.
Who?
And his wife, Evie. Randy Quaid.
Okay.
All right, so if you don't know who he is, he was nominated for an Oscar for The Last Detail in 1973.
I think I'm living in an alternate universe. I don't know who he is or what that film is. Why don't I know?
But he's been in Midnight Express and he's been in...
Remember him.
Yeah, he's been in so many things. He's the brother of Denis Quaid.
Right, yes. Okay, yes. Oh, hang on. Was he in Dumb and Dumber? No.
No, he was in all the vacation movies as Cousin Eddie.
Oh, yeah, I know him.
He was in Brokeback Mountain with Heath Ledger, actually.
I haven't seen that.
Well, I think he was even in something with Marlon Brando. He was in films with Jack Nicholson. He's worked with everybody.
Got it.
He's won Golden Globes.
Oh, well done, Randy.
He's done all sorts.
Apologies for not knowing who you are.
I know. Put him in the bin with
Mendelsohn.
Mento.
Who we love, by the way, Ben. We love you.
We do love him. We love you, Ben. You're still our patron saint, even though you've never returned any of our phone calls.
I just want to just quickly segue away from this for one moment. One of our telerecs from Safka was The New Look, and I did start it. He's acting as Christian Dior.
Yes.
His French accent is appalling, and it took me out of the show, so I couldn't. I'm going to try it again, but it was bothering me.
I started, couldn't finish. Wasn't for me. Mainly because I just couldn't believe that Ben Mendelsohn, with the saliva dribbling and drooling out of his mouth on Oxford Street, was really Christian Dior.
Christian Dior.
So I couldn't suspend my disbelief enough. But back to Randy Quaid, because he says his and his wife Evie's lives have been turned upside down by an evil Hollywood cabal that's out to get them. And they are running literally for their lives from this cabal.
What?
Yep. With all that in mind, we've got this medium weight Hollywood celeb who out of nowhere is on the run with his wife from a cabal called the Star Whackers, who are supposedly out to get them, maybe even kill them. And it all started when the pair were in Marfa, Texas. It's a really famous artists community in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. It's meant to be absolutely gorgeous, super cool. They'd gone there in the summer of 2009 to look at property and to start building a Randy Quaid museum.
Of course.
As you
what
do.
Would be in there? A Golden Globe?
I don't know. It's Brokeback Mountain paraphernalia. It was at that time that weird stuff apparently started happening. So, Randy's royalty checks weren't being delivered, which meant the pair had no money. Then there was the death of their very close friend, actor David Carradine.
Oh, yeah.
From supposed autoerotic asphyxiation in Thailand, where I am right now.
Yes, I remember that.
Now, they felt that was actually foul play and the work of the Star Whackers.
Right.
Because, of course...
Why do they have to be called that? Star Whackers?
The bloody Star Whackers! Because according to Randy and Evie, if the Star Whackers killed David, then they can collect the insurance covering his participation in some TV show he was working on overseas. Then Randy and Evie's friend, Jeremy Piven...
He's an actor.
He's an actor. He was in...
Entourage or something, was he?
Yes. I loved Entourage. I loved him.
But I remember him. I think he might have been in Ellen as well back in the day.
Maybe.
As her best friend.
I'm just going to say I loved him in Entourage, but he definitely has more hair now than he did then.
Oh, right.
I don't know if it's a rug or plugs, but it's something.
Plug, rug or shrug. Shrug, because we don't know.
I love it. Look, he got mercury poisoning.
Did he?
And nearly died. Oh. Yes. Which, again, Randy and Evie think was an orchestrated hit from the Star Whackers gone wrong.
Just too weird, isn't it?
And which, again, I know, they say, again, it was motivated by insurance fraud. So, while Randy and Evie were in Marfa, everything started then going wrong for them. So Evie apparently is a bit of a shit stirrer, and she was doing things like going to council meetings and speaking up about sort of delicate subjects between the local police and the sheriff's department, and none of that won them any friends in Marfa. Then the pair got arrested because they were wanted by the Santa Barbara police for defrauding the owner of a hotel, which, according to Randy and Evie, was all bullshit. According to Randy and Evie, it was all part of a conspiracy by the Star Whackers to get them behind bars so they could get the insurance money from some play or TV show they were doing. Okay. I don't know. But Geordie, I'm telling you, as you read more and more of this Vanity Fair article, you're like, what the fuck is going on here? Nothing makes sense. According to Evie, the hotel they were staying at apparently tricked them into getting a more expensive room. And they didn't realise that the hotel would charge them an extra $73,000 on top of what they had already paid.
How long were they staying in the hotel for? That's an extortionate amount.
Well, I don't know, because they say the credit card they used to pay for the room couldn't even take that kind of payment. So it didn't go through. And that the rest of all this stuff is bullshit. And that they only were meant to pay $10,000 for their hotel bill, which honestly is still a fuckload of money. But I guess when you're a Hollywood star, and that the rest of it was all like $73,000 was because what they thought was a free upgrade, but it wasn't free.
I'm getting the impression that maybe Evie and Randy might be broke and they're trying to concoct an elaborate story to get around paying their bills.
Geordie, I think you're onto something here, because there's a guy called Rob Forney.
I'm so intuitive.
I know you really are, because I was reading this going, what on earth is going on here? Well,
really?
Yes, because I thought, why would you make up this bullshit about Star Whackers and bring Heath Ledger into it and all this rubbish? But there's a Santa Barbara detective who dealt with the warrant for the couple's arrest. He said Evie had got on the phone. Well, he got her on the phone. He tried to sort out the situation with her, but she was rude, hung up on him. And then Evie says this guy, Rod, basically can't be trusted because he's part of the conspiracy plot.
Of course. Yes. Okay. I see where this is going.
Yes, and that he was a part of a conspiracy plot against Michael Jackson, because when she Googled this guy, she found a picture of him as a witness for the prosecution at the Michael Jackson 2005 trial for child molestation.
Is that true?
Well, Rod says all he did was serve the search warrant on Michael Jackson's private investigator. That was his involvement, and that maybe somehow there could be a picture on Google. That was a really big trial. There was everyone
it was massive
snapping.
And lots of people involved. I have one quick question though. What's the Heath Ledger angle? Are they saying that he was murdered by Star Whackers as well?
Star Whackers got him. Yep.
Right.
For money, insurance.
Yeah.
Either way, Evie told this guy, I'm not going to pay, and hung up. She's not going to pay this bill. In the Vanity Fair article, which honestly you should all read it because it's bonkers, Evie is basically joining dots between the death of David Carradine, the death of actor Robert Blake, which they said...
Who's old.
Which they say it was a setup, and that they are next.
Who's ancient.
It's ridiculous. She says she knows this because one day she was on her mobile phone and somehow it got hacked, and she heard a strange voice on the line say, if you kill her, there's a lot of money in it. Well,
oh my God.
Honestly, Geordie, as you intuitively already jumped ahead to, from what I've read, there is no fucking money because Evie spent it all.
Okay.
She likes Hermes. She likes Chanel. She likes Manolos. She likes expensive art. And she earns no money. None.
She married the wrong Quaid brother as well.
Basically.
Sorry,
yes,
Evie.
she did.
The one that no one's heard
Yeah.
of.
And she loves to spend all of Randy's money. And that the unpaid bill at the Texas hotel was not their first show at the rodeo doing this kind of thing. Yep. Apparently they skipped out on a Bel Air hotel bill worth $17,000.
Oh,
they did it again at the Biltmore in Montecito, $500. They did it again in San Francisco at Nob Hill Hotel, $55,000 plus dollars. So this is not, a mistake.
It's not oops.
They were doing this shit all over the country, although, according to Evie, all these hotels are just making shit up. And they had paid their bills in full, and it's all part of the Star Whackers conspiracy. Then, Randy got a part in a play called Lone Star Love around 2005. This was meant to be his big comeback because he'd been in Brokeback Mountain, his star was on the rise again, but one day he called in sick and never went back. Now, Jack Herrick, who was the composer and musical director of the show, said everyone in the industry had warned the producers of the show that Randy and Evie were basically unhinged. But Randy, without Evie, is charming. And he's an excellent actor. So he got the part.
I'm sure.
Yep. But things started to get tricky when Evie went on set. She was involving herself in the production.
You couldn't help yourself.
She couldn't. And she really wanted to be in charge of what he was wearing for his costume.
What?
She insisted that Randy have final approval, and she made his costume for him. So she dyed his hair bright red.
What?
And then she made him wear this
my God.
huge cod piece that was basically the size of an American gridiron ball. And, quote, she says, it was a huge cock. It was fucking great. It looked like gay Vivienne Westwood.
Oh, my God. Evie, what's going on?
I think Evie is a bit of a handful. Now, of course, this did not go down well with the production team. And after lots of screaming matches between Evie and the crew, lots of emails from Evie to the producers about their contractual obligations, she also sent weird naked pictures of herself holding a gun.
What?
Via email to people on the cast. Also, it was said that they were busted smoking pot and snorting white powder, could be anything, in their dressing room. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when Randy slapped one of his castmates 4 times in the head at a preview performance while in character. But he went off script, basically assaulted this guy on stage, and then ad-libbed about gynecological instruments to one of the female actresses while on stage.
Oh, dear.
The producers and 25 cast members contacted Actors Equity and filed an action suit against him. And he got barred from being an actor.
Okay, yeah.
And of course, Evie's like, they were accusing Randy of his character traits. This guy was supposed to be a lascivious monster, she said. All he was doing was acting in character. And of course, Evie and Randy claimed that the producers of the play were trying to kill them because they wanted the insurance money.
Wow.
So, it's just all going batshit crazy.
Yeah.
But Evie started wondering, why is this always happening to us?
Wonder.
Hint, Evie, it's you. In 2009, Evie and Randy contacted Becky Altringer, who's an LA private eye, to see who was trying to kill them. Evie said it's the union mob. She said they killed Heath Ledger, they killed Chris Penn, and we're next.
Chris Penn. Oh, he's the brother of Sean Penn. Mm-hmm. How did he allegedly die?
Can't remember. Becky started researching, and guess what? She found nada. No one was out to kill them.
She found?
Yes, this private eye.
Becky, the private eye, yes.
And the other actors died of misadventure. So when she told Evie this, Evie was like, no, you're wrong.
In that tone.
In the summer of 2009. Evie and Randy apparently stayed with Becky for a few days because they had no car, nowhere to go. All their cars had been repossessed. So Becky, the private eye, rented them an RV to live in because they had been staying inside the house, but Evie's dogs were pissing in Becky's house and shitting everywhere. Evie was going into the fridge and getting last night's beautiful dinner of roast beef and feeding it to her dogs. Basically, Becky had enough and said, fuck off. And Evie said, you can't do that to us because there's the mob outside. They're trying to kill us with chainsaws and shovels. And Becky's like, that's my gardener. Evie is just she's seeing chaos everywhere.
She's a little unhinged, yeah.
Becky also said she saw Evie snorting white powder. Evie says it was Demerol, which I think is like ibuprofen.
Why would you snort that?
Oh, well, actually, she said when you have a migraine, if you snort it, it goes like in your right nostril. It goes straight to the right side of your brain.
Oh, God.
Becky then actually later sued them in 2010 for non-payment of her PI fees, more than $15,000. And then there's the lawsuit. In 2010, Randy and Evie filed a 220-page lawsuit in the Los Angeles Superior Court, which was cancelled after Randy's check for $905 for court costs bounced.
Oh, dear, Randy.
So the lawsuit got chucked out. Now, Vanity Fair was given a copy of this lawsuit document, and they went through it and did their own investigation. They contacted people in the lawsuit, and in their opinion, they're calling bullshit on the whole thing. Yep.
Yes.
But here's what they say. Randy and Evie bought a house in Montecito in California for $1.3 million in 1989. In Randy's lawsuit pages, he reckons that a cabal of evil Hollywood lawyers, real estate agents, and accountants somehow duped them into handing over equity from the house to them, which was then used by the cabal as basically this steady stream of cash. You know, they were just taking out all of the equity. And it was all in Randy and Evie's name. Now, the City National Bank apparently was in on it too, and they got a share of Randy's stolen equity. Then, in 1991, this same cabal sold Randy and Evie's house by apparently forging their signatures, which Evie says this can be proved by an FBI handwriting analysis. However, in 2010, a bank employee from City National Bank somehow got in touch with them and said, guess what? Your house was never really sold. You're still the rightful owners.
Oh.
Despite the fact that there is a deed that shows the house was sold and a woman who handed over more than $1 million to buy that house.
Oh, dear.
They were arrested in 2010 because they were like, fuck it, this is still our house. We're going to go live there.
No.
Yep, they were arrested for squatting. Yep, because they're like, it's still ours. But, like I said, according to the land registry, the house belongs to a woman called Lynette Terrici, if she even exists, says Evie.
Oh.
Evie says, quote, she's a placeholder for the cabal.
Oh, my God. That poor woman.
But circling back to the cabal's plot against them, it started in 1983, according to Randy's lawsuit, when the cabal set up a fake trust to steal his money. The cabal allegedly used a fake probate file for a fake person called Rhonda L. Quaid to cash Randy's checks at the dodgy City National Bank, which was all in on it, and deposit the money into this fake trust account, which the cabal was then using. Now, Evie says Rhonda L. Quaid never existed and no one has ever met her. Quote, she was supposedly a school teacher, but you go to the county and you pull the probate file and it's $7 million in cash. How would a school teacher have that? It's Randy's royalty stream. I've researched everything. There's no body. They're just trying to merge the two identities in order to cash the checks. But according to Vanity Fair, who did the research, Rhonda L. Quaid did exist. And she died of cancer in Santa Barbara in 2005. Rhonda was worth about $1.5 million, not $7 million. And that was basically the worth of her house.
Was she a relative of Quaid?
Nope.
Why'd they have the same name? It's so odd.
Well, she's Rhonda and he's Randy.
But the last name is Quaid.
Yeah, but there's 1 million Quaids.
Are there? There's 2 that I know of.
Yeah, but we don't know. I mean, look, it's America.
I just think it's odd.
I think it's odd, but I think it's not impossible.
Okay, let's just accept that as being normal.
I can look that up. I can look and see how many.
But she's real.
Quaids there are. But basically, Rhonda's not stealing Randy's money.
Maybe there was a mix-up, though, because the names are so similar.
But the money never went there. She didn't have $7 million.
Right, yeah.
It's all made up. Evie's making it
Oh,
up. And there are 17 other people on Randy's shit list in the lawsuit. And most of them are people who helped him with his career. And they say they're just really angry and sad because they loved Randy, but they blame everything that's going on Evie. Now, a former business associate reportedly told Randy repeatedly over the years, your wife is an out-of-control spender. She's spending all your money. Now, they apparently lived a really lavish lifestyle and now it's all gone. And instead of pulling back and trying to get on track financially, Evie is trying to convince everyone that people are stealing their money and a cabal is trying to kill them. She says, quote, over a 10-year period, I spent $50,000 on Donald Judd furniture. I bought 200 pairs of Manolo Blahniks, and that's basically $125,000. Randy's royalty stream is being stolen because she's like, that's all I spent.
You didn't do the maths, Evie.
Do the math, girl. And also, too, I'm sorry, but they had loads of cars, loads of everything. She's spending. They filed for bankruptcy in 2000 and they owed $700,000 in tax. Everyone, like I said, blames Evie, but Evie says if it wasn't for her, Randy would be nothing. Quote, he's been in this business for 40 years and I've been watching his back for 25. Why do you think he's alive?
What?
So back in 2010, they were trying to get a trial to prove that Lynette Terrici didn't own the house. Never happened. They fled to Canada to seek asylum and try to outrun the Hollywood star whackers. They were sleeping in their car. And look, their mental unraveling was splashed all over the news, all over the world, which is when this Vanity Fair article came out. And there's a part of the article where Randy gets reflective and he's genuinely perplexed by where all the money has gone and why people want to kill him. He says it's because when he was doing movies, everyone else was checking in with their accountants and worried about the money. He was focused on the work, which led him to being ripped off. And he says, quote, my main concern was putting on a good performance, but at the same time, it was always like I was never able to get ahead. And that felt weird. I just thought, well, are we spending that much money? He then goes on to say, my accountant, he sent me a letter behind Evie's back. He said, your wife is spending so much money, she's going to drag you into the poorhouse. They were trying to separate us, divide us. And it really affected me. Like, I started looking at Evie sideways like, this bitch. Yeah. He said, Evie was going into Hermes. She was going into all the stores. Chanel, the whole deal. But now I know, if you total up the bills, they're just a little fraction of what I was capable of paying for. I was making enough money for me to comfortably support Evie and her shopping. They wanted to separate us because Evie is very intuitive and very smart. She's the smartest person I know.
You drank the Kool-Aid.
You can call her crazy. You can call her whatever you want, but she's my lifeline. And if she wasn't with me, I don't know where I'd be. Well, Randy, I'll tell you where you'd be. You would still have loads of money and you wouldn't be running from a fake Hollywood cabal who you think is trying to kill you.
Oh, dear. I feel very sad for them both, particularly him.
Look, I just feel like he's been reeled in and controlled, you know?
And convinced.
She was an it girl and model from a very aristocratic and wealthy family who she fucked up and lost all the money and then got herself a Hollywood husband. But you were dead on the money when you said they're just trying to make shit up to not have to pay their bills. And that's what I think too.
Well, I feel like Evie is just the distilled version of all conspiracy theories. I feel like she has shown us how easy it is to be reeled in, to have facts changed to suit the narrative, which is called confirmation bias, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
So you only believe what backs your story. And you create new alternative versions of reality to back that as well. And before you know it, you're deep in it. So much so that in the past, when we've done stories about conspiracies, such as, I think there was the one about the 3 guys who wrote that fake story into Playboy, and one of them ended up believing in his own fucking made up conspiracy. And even some of the 4chan people who did confessed to making up the things that then eventually ran forth and became all of the deep state stuff. They also somehow believed in it at some point. It's weird.
Yes. But, we also did that episode where people were tricked into confessing to a murder they knew they didn't commit. So, look, I think the mind is a fickle thing.
It's a fragile thing.
It is.
Yes.
It is. On that note, that's the story of the Quaids.
Well done, Michelle.
The further I looked into it, I was like, what? It just got crazier and crazier.
It's quite mind-blowing, isn't it? There's a lot to think on that. And think on you shall do, listeners.
Especially when we have just 3 things left to say.
Oh, yes. Wherever you are.
Whatever you do, just keep eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, dropping,